We begin today's shiur at the very top of Daf Kuf Zayin, at the beginning of Perek Beis Shammai, the 13th Perek of Maseches Yevamos. Before we begin the actual text, let's glance at the side where we see a nosei, topic heading, Mivneh, structural note, combined into one note. You see there are numbers 1 through 5 as they will appear in the Mishnah. These are Hey Nekudos, or 5 points, Nekudos Machlokas, 5 points of controversy, Bein Beis Shammai u Beis Hillel Be'inyan Miun. The controversy exists between the schools of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding the topic of Miun. That is the rabbinic marital institution whereby a minor girl, a girl under 12 years old, who had been married off by her mother or brother, whom in contrast with the father, they can create a rabbinic level marriage. A father, when marrying off his daughter, marries her off with the authority of the Torah level marriage. To break up such a marriage, when a father is involved, a get, a formal document of divorce is required. However, in the absence of the father, for example, if he died, so a mother or brother of the minor can marry her off. That kind of marriage can be dissolved or disbanded through the girl's indication before her reaching adulthood that she does not want to continue with him, with the husband. So now we turn to the Mishnah. Beis Shammai omrim ein mimanim elo arusos. Miun applies only to arusos. Those are girls who reached only the first stage of the marital relationship, i.e., the point at which she had received money from a man in exchange for her marriage, but they had not consummated the marriage with the marriage canopy, a ceremony, which is called nisuin. Ubeis Hillel omrim arusos unesuos. Not only arusos can do miun, but nesuos as well. Even those girls who had consummated their marriage, being that it's all in the context of a rabbinic level marriage, they can also refuse and walk out. Beis Shammai omrim bebaal. The miun is something done between husband and wife. Ubeis Hillel omrim bebaal ubiyavam. Not only a husband, but also a lever, in a levirate marriage, the yavam, the surviving brother of her deceased husband, she can also indicate her unwillingness to be a yavama, to marry him. Beis Shammai omrim b'fanav, ubeis Hillel omrim b'fanav v'shelo b'fanav. Beis Shammai says that the miun must be done in his presence, and Beis Hillel says that the girl can express her intentions of miun even not in front of him. Number 4, Beis Shammai omrim bebeis din, ubeis Hillel omrim bebeis din v'shelo bebeis din. Beis Shammai says that it must take place in front of a court, and Beis Hillel says it can be done even sheloi bebeis din. Omru lohem Beis Hillel lebeis Shammai mema'enes v'hiktana afilu dalid v'hei pa'omim. Beis Hillel says that miun can be done even 4 or 5 times. In other words, multiple times. A girl can go in and out of marriages, up till, of course, the time she becomes an adult, at which time then her marriage would be a full-fledged marriage requiring a get. But up till adulthood, Beis Hillel says she can go in and out with the miun instrument. Omru lahem Beis Shammai ein benos Yisrael hefker. The Jewish girls are not hefker. Hefker would mean, without a literal translation, hefker would mean something that's cheap and light, that we allow this to go on. Elo mimaenes, rather the girl, the minor, expresses her miun intentions once, umamtenes, and waits, ad shetagdil v'timo'ein v'tinose, until she becomes an adult and is mimaenes. It seems a second time, and that's not clear what its role is at this point. The Gemara will deal with that. And then v'tinose, and then get married. Let us read a Rashi together on the third line from the top. Ein benos Yisrael hefker. Va'afilu mino erusin. Beis Shammai goes so far as to say that this objection is even if you're dealing with the erusin level of marriage, where you're not dealing with a consummation of the marriage. But even that, done multiple times, is not acceptable. Ve'afilu min ha'erusin lo temayin v'te'ores li'acher v'tachzor v'temoyin. She shouldn't repeat an erusin with this one and that one and the next guy. Elo mima'enes bozeh. She is mima'enes. She refuses to continue with this one. V'tamtin mi'le'aros la'achir, and she will wait before entering erusin with someone else until she becomes adult. V'yu kiddushin gemura, and then her kiddushin, the erusin, would be complete. V'lo teitzei oiv misheni b'miyun, and then the departure from that second one could not be done through miyun because she would already have become adult. As we continue in the Gemara itself, we glance at the side where we see a nosei mivneh heading. A diamond appears. There are 4 hesberim lamachloikis beishamei beishil beim mima'anin nisuos. We saw in the Mishnah the first point of controversy surrounded the issue of miyun for a girl who had reached nisuin, who had consummated the marriage, but she's still a minor. Can that take place? So according to Beis Hillel, it can. Beis Shammai says no. What is the reason for that? Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel. My taimo de Beis Shammai. Why is miyun limited to an arusa? Lefi she'ein tanai b'nisuin. Because when it comes to the institution of nisuin, of consummated marriages, conditions are not made. Now we take a look at Rashi. Lefi she'ein tanai mo'il b'nisuin shel gedola. When you're dealing with an adult girl, here, of course, our Mishnah is preoccupied with a minor, but in general, when you're dealing with an adult girl, adult woman, means she's over 12, conditions are not effective when it comes to nisuin. Vafilu havelei tano b'shas kiddushin. Even if the couple had made some type of condition at the time of initial marriage, the stage at which money is given from man to woman in exchange for her agreeing to marriage, and let us say that agreement was made on condition, with some type of stipulated condition. If they continue, achule achle b'shas biyah v'chuppah, when they consummate the marriage, whatever condition they had made is void, becomes they forego that mechilos, to forego. V'chaylulu kiddushin kamoi, and the initial kiddushin takes hold. V'i amris nesuah ktana temoyin, if you would accept this idea that a minor in her marriage could walk out after consummation, lo yadi inshi demishum katnusu, the public won't be aware that her walking out was because of the age. She was a minor. Elo amri tino hava lo benisuin. People will think that she's walking out because a condition that had been stated was not met. The osula meimar yesh tanai benisue gedola. And here is the problem, and that it will come to, this is what we call a gzeira, it will come to people thinking that Tanai conditions work even with consummation of the marriage of an adult. We continue in the Gemara. We say, now we see what Rashi had explained in the words of the Gemara. Let's read the phrase we read already. Lefi she'ein Tanai b'nisuin. We say that in general conditions are of no value when it comes to the consummation of marriages. V'i nesua temoin, if a nesua ktana would do miyun, osi lemeimar, people will come to think yesh tnai b'nisuin. They'll come to this wrong conclusion, thinking that in general there is significance to conditions made in the case of the nisuin of a gedola. The Gemara asks, now you'll notice that we have a little bays here. We started off with an aleph at the Maitaima, and now bays and gimel. 3 stages of questions within what Shmuel is, within Shmuel. So the Gemara asks, Nichnasa lechupa v'lo nivala, mai ika lemeimar. There is a case of a girl who entered the marriage canopy but did not yet experience intimacy, which this Nichnasa lechupa essentially is the beginning of the consummation of the marriage, but she hasn't as yet experienced intimacy. So are you going to say that she too is not eligible to do miyun according to Beis Shammai? So the Gemara says, in fact, the same reason applies. Lefi she'ein tanai b'chuppah. Conditions are not made with regard to the chuppah, the marriage canopy ritual, either. Let's glance at the side again in Rashi. Nichnos lechuppah, ma'iko lemeimar lebeis Shammai, amai lo mima'enes. The Ko'amri, why in the case of Nichnas L'chuppah as well does Beis Shammai object to the miyun that they have said Ein Mimanin Elo Arusos, that only Arusos can do miyun? Umashma Lafuke Nichnas L'chuppah, O Shnifsor L'shluchei Baal Denafka Lo Michlal Arusa. Any stage beyond Arusa, there are different possible stages that exist in leading up to a complete marriage. Right after the Erusin stage. So after the Erusin, Beis Shammai seem to say that no miyun will no longer work. So why in this case of Nichnas L'chuppah v'lo nivala? So Rashi continues, Lefi she'ein t'nai moyel b'chuppah v'iyamris ketana sh'nichnas l'chuppah v'lo nivala temoyin. If we will allow a minor to walk out of a marriage after being under the marriage canopy, people will think Tano Hava Lahu, that there was a condition, and people will think erroneously that a condition can be made with regard to the chuppah as well. So we don't allow miyun to take place for the ketana. The third question, Mosar ho'av l'shluchei abal. If a father is giving over his daughter to the emissaries, and we should point out, Rashi does this, that the word av here is not an exact term necessarily. It would be easier to read it if you would understand Mosar av like Mosar ha'im, or the ach, the mother, because we're dealing with a rabbinic situation where a mother or brother are marrying off their daughter, and she had already reached Erusin, and emissaries, agents coming from the husband to pick her up had arrived, and the mother or the brother gave her over to these emissaries. So in that case, why is it that Beis Shammai says even at that early stage, this is before the marriage canopy, why is it that people will say, why is it that there's no miyun at this point? So the Gemara answers, Lo plug Rabbanan. The Rabbanan made a rule across the boards that after Erusin, no miyun. Now Rashi spells out here that the explanation we gave before wouldn't apply. Before we were worried about if we would allow miyun, people will come to the conclusion that Tanai could be made, and we don't with regard to a gedola. And we don't want people reaching that conclusion. Here, even if they were to say that as a result of the miyun, people will come to some kind of wrongful conclusion, that won't apply over here. Why not? So let's look at the Rashi together. Mosra ha'av l'shluchei abal ma'iko l'meimar inami Osi l'meimar tanai moyel b'masira. Even if people would say that a condition is effective with regard to this situation where she's given over, shapir ko'amri, people will be saying, okay, Sharei ein kan chiba, there isn't any state of true affection. The name of that people would say achle the tnoe the kedushin, that there has been a foregoing of any conditions. This idea of foregoing conditions is, why would someone forego a condition? Because of the great love that starts to arise between the couple. That is a svara, that's a point of analysis at a later stage, but at this early stage, people aren't going to think that a condition had been, they've been moichel on a condition, that a condition was, let's say, worthy of having been foregone. We have said earlier that miyun is not to take place, according to Beis Shammai, after Erusin, because if miyun would be effective, people would think that conditions are effective, and we wanted to be clear that conditions in the case of nisuin of a gedola we wanted to be clear that they're ineffective. And why are conditions ineffective? Because when you reach that later stage, a certain level of affinity is achieved, whereby people forego their conditions. Let's say that is a given, that's a reality in the eyes of Beis Shammai, that people forego their conditions. So that it's important for us not to create a situation where people would think that conditions that are made, stipulations that are made, could have some effect. In the case of Nimsur l'shluchei habal, if people see her walking away, going back to her father's house through miyun, and people would conclude that conditions are effective at that point, that's a reasonable thing to conclude, because at that point you don't have that state of affinity which is responsible for the eradication, for the absolution of conditions that may have been made. So why then do Beis Shammai say that at this point of Nimsur l'shluchei habal does miyun still nevertheless not work? Because once again, if people would think that this is a sign that tnoim are still binding, let them think that. There's no reason to think otherwise. So to this, the Gemara answered, Lo plug Rabbanan. The Rabbanan made a rule across the board, an unqualified rule, that anything beyond Erusin is a state at which miyun is no longer effective. So we continue in the Gemara. Ubeis Hillel. Beis Hillel responds, I don't have to worry about this whole area of mistake. Beis Hillel made a yadi. People know the nisui ketana equals the rabbanon ninu, that the marriage of a ketana is rabbinic, and they won't come to drawing conclusions from her walking out to the issue of nisuim as it relates to a gedola. The Gemara continues with a second approach. Rab over Rav Yosef Damri Travayu Taimo de Beis Shammai Lefi she'ein odom oisa biloso bilas znus. A man doesn't want the intimacy that he conducts with a woman to be viewed as an act of harlotry. Therefore, when you're dealing with intimacy, that's the final stage in consummating the marriage. If a ketana would be able to walk away from the husband, what are we going to be saying about the intimacy that they had conducted as part of their nisuin? All will be left to conclude is that the act was a non-marital act, because when she's mima'enes, she in effect voids any marriage that had taken place retroactively. So that there's. And what about the act of intimacy? Well, we'll say that was an act of harlotry. So men don't want their acts of intimacy to be viewed that way, and therefore there will be a deterrent built in to all men wanting to marry in a rabbinic fashion a ketana if she would have that option. Therefore, once bia is done, no more miyun. the Gemara asks the same type of questioning as we saw in the previous section. What about a case where there was no intimacy yet? She simply stood under the marriage canopy, and we're saying, according to Beis Shammai, she can no longer do miyun. What's the reason for that? Answer: Lo nichole deteve chuppah de isura. A man, even at that stage, doesn't want himself to be viewed as someone that stood under a canopy in anticipation of intimacy that would have been an act of harlotry. Well, what about this? Why at this early stage, even before the marriage canopy, do we say, according to Beis Shammai, that the minor cannot walk out of the marriage? Answer: Lo plug rabbanon. The rabbanon, when instituting a rule, they made the rule in an unqualified fashion, and they simply stated that all girls after Erusin, any stage that is beyond Erusin, namely Mosar Av L'Shulchan Baal onwards, no mi'un. Beis Hillel responds, Kevon di'ika kedushin uksuba, since in this marriage there is money was given, there was a marriage document prepared, lo asu lemeimar debiloso bilazmus. People are not going to come to regard what that man did with her, even if he had engaged in intimacy with her, that was an act of harlotry. Now, harlotry is exactly what it implies. It's just a fling. Not so when you're dealing with the this minor's marriage, where there were other, I will say, marriage accoutrements that were present. Rav Papa Omar, a third explanation. Time of the Beis Shammai, Mishum Peri. We'll explain this in a moment. Peri, of course, has to do with the benefits that a man receives from the properties his wife brings into a marriage. And the reason for Beis Shammai objecting to anyone beyond an orus doing miyun, a girl doing miyun, it's a peri consideration. Time of the Beis Hillel, mishum peri, and the time of Beis Hillel also is peri related. Now the Gemara explains that. Taimo de Beis Shammai mishum peri, the I amris nesua temayin. If that were the case, that a girl could walk out of the marriage just simply walking out without any need for a get, a man will then be overly motivated. Shomit v'ochiluhu mina. The self lemepak kaima. What he's going to do, he's going to exhaust whatever properties she brings into the marriage, and figuring, why should I even bother taking care of the property when I know that she could very well just walk out on me? That's what shomit v'ochiluhu mina. He's going to exhaust, he'll experience, let's say, overuse, an irresponsible use of her property in order to extract whatever benefit he can have, because he knows that she could simply walk out on him. So that we don't want to have, we'll say, this form of property loss in the wings, and therefore we say that after Erusin, no possibility of miyun. So she's not going to be able to walk out on him, and therefore he'll take greater care of her property. We should point out that at the Erusin stage, a man doesn't get peri to begin with. A peri is something that only after they reach the nisuin stage, then the husband is entitled to the peri. But prior to that, he's not entitled to it, so there's no fear of his overuse of her property to begin with. Beis Hillel, the idea behind Beis Hillel of allowing miyun even up till the nisuin is adarabba, to the contrary. Again, here is we'll say a type of psychological analysis in the opposite direction. Kevon di amris temoyin, since she does have the option of walking out, that will actually motivate the husband to take greater care of her property. Ashbuchi mashbich lehu, he will improve the property. Sovar, figuring, Di'i lo, if I don't take good care of the properties she brings into the marriage, aitzi lo kroveh umafki lo minei. Her relatives will give her counsel to encourage her to walk out. So by the husband taking care of her properties, by the halacha enabling her to walk out even after nisuin, that will encourage the husband to take greater care of her properties, so that she doesn't get counsel to leave him. They'll say, "Oh, this is such a nice man. He's so responsible. He's so careful with your properties. You should stick it out with him. Stay with the man." Rava Omar, Hainu Taima de Beis Shammai. She'ein Odom Toreach B'Seuda Umafsida. The Seuda is a meal, a festive meal that people prepare in the case of the Nisuin. At the Nisuin stage, a great feast is prepared, similar to what we do nowadays at weddings. Now, if a man is going to know that she could walk out on him even after Nisuin, so he's not going to want to marry her to begin with, because otherwise, in surrounding Nisuin, it's a given that great meals are made, and he's going to. Why would he want to marry a girl knowing that he will, after having prepared and invested so much in the meal, she could simply walk out on him? So he's going to say, "I don't want to get started in the first place." Beis Hillel, and as far as Beis Hillel is concerned, that will not be a deterrent. Travayu nichalahu, both the man and the woman find it pleasing that they go all the way, that they erusin and they do nisuin, kihechi delepuk alayu kola deishus, so that they create a name for themselves that they are people that had been married. There is value in knowing that a person had been married. Even if she could walk out on him after Nisuin, after he invested so much in that meal, that won't deter him, because at least he will have achieved a status of being a man that was married. That might have significance if I might entitle myself to my own editorial or my own interpretation, and that is that there are people who, whatever circumstances there are, whatever life circumstances have arisen, have not been married, and in the eyes of many in the public, that raises eyebrows. Why was this man never married? And that could very well, but the Gemara is referring to kol of the ishus. However, a person that was married, so that even though the marriage was disbanded, is less of a problem, we will say, in the eyes of the public. So achieving this status known as ishus has significance to every man, and hence he's willing to risk even the loss of the investment that he makes in the meal, because he knows that through marrying the Ktana he can achieve kol de ishus. Beis Shammai oimrim bebaal ubeis Hillel omrim bebaal ubeyavam. We saw in the Mishnah the second point of machlokes was the extent at which we allow miyun to operate. Beis Hillel goes so far as saying not only against a husband but against a yavam as well. On the side of the Gemara, we have a nosei followed by a mivnei, structural note. The nosei is lebeis Hillel mema'enes liyavam. According to Beis Hillel, miyun can be done in the face of the yavam. When we speak about that, is that lima amoro? Is that a reference to the undoing of the money that was given, but the yibum bond still exists? When the girl is mema'enes, she's basically rejecting that which the money she had received had accomplished. But it's not an abrogation, or it's not a dissolution of the yibum bond, the zikah. Or do Beis Hillel hold that the miyun that she does is an undoing of the marital bond, the zika bond, the yavam bond that is created with the death of her husband? And that, by the way, that last statement is worthy of analysis itself. Who says that the zika is created necessarily with the death of the husband and not with the initial marriage of the first husband, whereby a woman who marries is creating, upon her initial marriage, she's creating a bond with the husband's brother in the event that the husband dies, leaving no children. So what does the miyun accomplish when done to a yavam according to Beis Hillel? Does it undo simply whatever halachic accomplishment was made through the money she received, or does it undo the entire bond? Then there are nafkaminas, there are differences that arise as a result of this analysis. The triangles that appear will highlight the names Rav Oshaya and later Ula. Cholkim, they disagree. Im miyun biyavam lebeis Hillel kolel miyun lezikaso. They will be arguing on that very point. Does the miyun undo the bond as well? The Gemara, Omar Rav Oshaya, Mima'enes Lema'moro V'eino Mima'enes Lezikoso. According to Beis Hillel, that says miyun can be done to a yavam, the miyun undoes the mimer. Mimer is the money that she had received, but she doesn't do miyun to the zika, to the bond. We glance at the Rashi, close to the bottom. Omer Rav Oshai, Memenes l'mamor, lebeis Hillel di'amri memenes biyavam. According to Beis Hillel, it says that miyun is done even in the face of the yavam. That is l'mamoro mimaenes. She walks out of the mimer that had taken place. She'im also bo mimer. If the yavam, the surviving brother of her rabbinic husband, rabbinic meaning the marital status of the husband, not that the husband was a rabbi, but the rabbinic marriage, leaving the surviving brother, and if he had given her money, she is memaynes ve'okroso, and it uproots it. Shalote tzricha get l'ma'moro. The miyun that she does obviates the necessity of a get that would be given in the case of a get of money given to a yavama. If they want to undo that and she doesn't initiate it, but he wants to, he would have to give her a get. Avol chalitza shehi b'shvil zika lo okra. But the need for the shoe removal ceremony, the mi'un does not undo that need. Now we continue in the Gemara. Omar Rav Chisda, my taimo de Rav Oshaya. What is the reason for Rav Oshaya's making of this distinction? So we have a first approach. You can see that we have a number circled, and then there's a second stage of analysis that continues at the top of Omid Bey. So he says at the beginning, first stage, Maimer the midaito matzia okra. Maimer, the money that she received, which is something that she had on her own accepted, so she can undo that. Zika de bal korcha lo matzi akra. However, the marital bond, which is something that comes upon her against her will, that's not something she can undo. Now, what do we mean bal korcha? So Rashi explains mikidushe rishon umikoch nisuin ramya oleo. Ubarishon lo miano. The bond comes around as a result of the initial marriage to the first husband. That creates the zika, the bond to the brother, as we said, as in the potential that if the husband dies, there is this brother in the wings. And Rashi adds very importantly, and she never did mi'un to the first husband. So that bond, the Zika bond, exists upon her in terms of the Gemara Baal Korcha. We continue with a question. V'harei bi'ah de Baal Korcha The Gemara continues at the top of Amud Beis, Umatzia Akra. Rashi says at the bottom of Amud Aleph, Arei Bias Yavam Baal Korchahi. The intimacy done by a Yavam is something that can be done against the Yevama's will. As it says we learned earlier in the Masechta in the Perek Kedoma, Ba'ba Yevimto Yevama Yavo Alel. That's a pasuk which teaches us Baal Korcha. Rashi continues at the top of Amud Beis, Umatzya Akra Shalo Tehei Tzricha Get Labioso. Deho Amri Beis Hillel Mema'enes Biyavam Dumya Dabao. Beis Hillel said that just like you see miyun done in the case of a husband, and when, according to Beis Hillel, can miyun be done? Even after biyah. So in the case of a yavam as well, miyun can be done, even with regard to biyah. And biyah is something that exists Baal Korcha, against her will. So if you're describing the zika as something that's Baal Korcha, why is that reason for holding that the miyun doesn't undo that? The miyun undoes the biyah, as Rashi says that there is no need for a get. So you see the effectiveness of the miyun in obviating the need for a divorce document. So why is it that the miyun with regard to the zika is ineffective? Ella, stage 2 of analysis. Bia umaimer dehu ka'avid matzya akrab. The intimacy of a yavam and maimer, money that he gives, is something that the man initiated, the husband, human being, man initiated. So that's something that's in her hands to undo matzya akra. However, zika, the Rahmana Rama Allah, the bond, which is something that's imposed upon her from heaven, lo matzya akra, that's not something that is in her power to undo. Ula Omar. Ula, in analyzing Beis Hillel, who holds you can do miyun to yavam, Ula holds mima'enes af lezikoso. Miyun can be done even to undo the bond. My taima. What's the reason for that? Nisui kamoi ko akra. When she does miyun, she in effect is undoing the original marriage. And if you undo the original marriage, so part and parcel, the zika goes by the wayside as well. Esfei Rava Le'ula. Rava introduces a Tanaic source to pose a challenge to Ula. The source deals with two brothers, Ruvain and Shimon, and we have a little illustration in the margin of the Gemara to help along. Ruvain married Shimon's daughter. When Shimon, Ruvain dies, so Shimon would be looking at his daughter in the context of Yibon. Of course, the father doesn't marry his daughter. Now, with our apologies, we just have to correct the mistake we made in reading our chart. Ruvain has a daughter that is a minor, and Shimon, the brother, married the daughter. And Shimon happened to have another wife as well. That's a tzora. Shimon dies before the daughter of Reuven that was married to him did miyun. That's the background for appreciating the Gemara. So now Rava asks as follows: Kol shi'cholu l'ma'in v'lo miyano. Any situation where a girl could have done miyun, but she didn't do it. Tzarasa choyletzes v'lo misyabemes. The co-wife does chalitza, but cannot do yibum. The reason for not being allowed to do yibum is this is a co-wife of a minor. It's a co-wife of an erva. So that with Shimon's death, what's Reuven expected to do? He can't marry his own daughter, and he thereby doesn't do yibum with the co-wife of his brother either. However, the source does say that chalitza is to be done. Ve'amai, why is that the case? Why is this stated that no yibum can take place? Tima'ain hashta, let the daughter of Reuven do miyun right now, v'takrinu l'nisui kamoi, and let the miyun that she does to her father undo the original marriage, putting her out of the picture completely, v'tisyabein sarasa, and let the co-wife do yibum as a simple case of a widow of a deceased brother. The Gemara answers that in general, that is in fact what miyun would do. It would undo the original marriage. However, tzoras erva shiny. Here we're dealing not with a simple case of yibum, but she's a co-wife of a forbidden woman. Namely, the daughter of Reuven is forbidden to Reuven as he is her father. And now you have the co-wife of a forbidden woman. So it's not a simple situation of undoing a marriage from the outset, of undoing the original marriage, because here you're dealing with a co-wife of a forbidden woman. The Toni Rami Bar Yecheskel. Rami Bar Yecheskel teaches the following: Miano bebal, if a ketana in general does miyun with the husband, muteres la'aviv, that girl can marry the former husband's father, because miyun to the original husband annuls, voids the initial marriage. So she's considered totally unrelated. So she can then turn around and marry his father. However, beyavam asura la'aviv, miyun that is done not to the original husband, but to the husband's brother, it's a brother from the same father, asur la'aviv, she cannot marry the father. Alma, what do we see from this source? Bishas nefila, when nefila means literally falling, at the time she falls to the yavam, nir eis kikaloso, the impression of her being a daughter-in-law is created. She appears at that point as a daughter-in-law. When she was married to the original husband, so that impression, even though technically speaking she was a daughter-in-law, but the impression of being a daughter-in-law had not been created. When is that impression created? At the point that the husband dies, leaving the yavam. Hachanami, so too in the case featured by the case that Rava introduced in his source. In that case as well, b'shas tefila nires kitzoras bito. The co-wife appears at that point as the co-wife of a forbidden relation. We take a look at the Rashi, Hochinami. Rashi that we're looking at is a few lines down from here. Hochinami, Afagav de'okro unisui kamoi, even though the original marriage is undone, so you'd have the daughter of Reuven doing miyun and undoing the original marriage, nevertheless, nires tzorosa kitzoras bito. As far as the co-wife is concerned, she appears to be the co-wife of Reuven's daughter. Hoyel ve'ahanu nisui ochiv bebito lemirmi kamei. The reason for that is that the marriage of his brother, of Reuven's brother, enabled the Tzora to now become eligible to Reuven. So that with the death of Shimon, she is now appears to be a co-wife of a forbidden relative. So that the undoing of the original marriage doesn't help to undo this particular appearance of appearing as the tzara of a forbidden relative. On the side of the Gemara, in anticipation of the new marking that we see, under the Nosei Mivneh heading, a house shape appears, Gimel Deos, the Yevamos Shemiano, Tahainu Shenisua Rishonim Hoyu Derabanan, Ma Dino Lagabi Ach Acher, or Hu Atzmo Shemiana Bo. When viewing a Tana that did miyun to a Yavam, this is a situation where the original marriage had been Derabanan. What is her status regarding one of the other brothers? What is the status with regard to the brother-in-law himself to whom she had done miyun? Is she muteris to these people? So we're going to see three opinions. Rav, and then Shmuel, followed by Rav Asi. Omar Rav, miyana bozeh asuro lozeh. If she did miyun to one brother, one of the surviving brothers, she's usher to the other brother as well. So that if Reuven died leaving Shimon and Levi, and she did miyun to Shimon, she's usher to Levi as well. Midi dahave abalas haget, similar to the one who received a divorce document. Balas haget, lav kevon de itzura la lechad. Is it not so that when a woman receives a divorce document from a particular man, so itzura lahu lekuhu, she's also to all of his brothers as well. Each one of the brothers, she is considered grushas ochiv with regard to any other brother. So hachanami lo shna. So too over here, when she does miyun to one, it makes her a type of grushas ochiv with regard to all the rest. We should point out this halacha applies even in the case of Yibum as well, where if one Yavam gives her a get, she is usher, even though when you're dealing with a get done by Yavam, you're dealing with a rabbinical instrument. Nevertheless, the get given by a Yavam to a Yavama makes her prohibited to all the other brothers as well. Shmuel Omar, miyano bazeh muteres lozeh, v'lo damyo lebala seget. Her doing miyun to one of the Yavamim, one of the men, does not answer her on the others. And in Shmuel's opinion, it's not comparable to the case of the get. Balas haget, in the case of the giving of a divorce document, who the ka'ovid ba, he is the initiator of that. Hacha, he ka'ovda bay. In the case of miyun, she is initiating it. The omra lo ra'ina bach v'lo savina bach. In doing that, she's saying lo ro'ina. Ro'ina is an Aramaic word for rotsa, for I don't want you. And savina also is an expression meaning desire. I don't have any desire for you. And we infer boch hu delo ro'ina ha bechavroch ro'ina. It's you that I don't want, but your other brother I do want. So that as far as Shmuel is concerned, there's a major distinction between miyun and the case of get. Rav Asi Omar miyana bozeh muteres afilu loi. Miyun, after done between the Ketana and the Yavam, does not preclude the possibility of her subsequently marrying that very man. The Gemara asks, Lema Kreboshaya Svirole the Omar Eino Memaenes Lazika. So should we say that Rav Asi's halacha is because Rav Asi subscribes to Reboshaya, who we saw on the at the end of Omen Aleph, who said that miyun does not undo the original zika. So is that what? And since the miyun doesn't undo the original bond exists. Thereby showing us that Rav Asi supports Rav Oshaya's analysis. And of course that's in contrast or in distinction to Ula's analysis. So should we say that? The Gemara says, Bechad Yavam Hachi Nami Damatsya Okra. If there were in fact only one Yavam, she would be undoing the Zika as well. Unlike Rav Oshaya. Hacha, Rav Asi's din is Bishnei Yivmin Askinon, where there are two surviving brothers. The ein miun lechatzi zika. When you have two surviving brothers, so there is a bond between her and both of those men. So with regard to each man, in quantitative terms, there's a half a zika. So the miun does not work to break a half bond. So that even though and as a result of that, the miun is ineffective in ruining the bond altogether. And therefore, Rav Asi says, if she does miun in the case that there are two brothers, her miun had no effect on the zika. It's only when there's one brother would the miun have that effect to undo even the zika. Which, as we said, that point shows us that Rav Asi doesn't subscribe to Rav Oshaya, because according to Rav Oshaya, the bond is never undone, even when there's only one brother. Ki also Ravin Omer Rabbi Yochanan miano bozer muteres le'achin v'lo hodulo. Ravin came and he cited Rabbi Yochanan as saying that when miun is done to the yavam, she remains muteres to the other brothers, and they did not concede to him. Man lo hodulo, who did not concede to that. So that what was just said was that when miun is done to one brother, she's allowed to the other brothers. Who would not accept that? Omar Abaye, Rav wouldn't accept that, because Rav said straight out that if she does miun to one, she becomes also to all the other brothers. And here you have a statement where she does miun to one of the Yevamim, she's muteres to them. So Rav wouldn't accept that. Rava Omar, Rav Oshaya. Rava says that this statement would be something that Rav Oshaya would not agree with. If we take a look at Rashi, Rav Oshaya lo hodelo. Rashi we're looking at as a cross. Amir midikomer Rabbi Yochanan muteres le'achin. From the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says that she's muteres to the other brothers, afagav deihu gufe nami mashma. Even though when she says she's muteres to the brothers, even though he himself is included in is implied or included in that. Umiu ika achin in tahabile miun lachatzi zika. We say that there's a heter if there are other brothers, then she's muteres to the one that she did miun to as well. Once again, the term la'achin implies, according to how Rashi is presenting this, it implies she's muteres to the Yavam himself. Well, that gives us the impression that the heter to the Yavam himself is because there are other brothers, because of this concept of there's no miun for a chatzi zika. Ravasi, like Ravasi explained, avol b'chad Yavam demiano b'zika shlema. But if there was only one surviving brother and the miun was done to a complete bond, asura, she would be prohibited. Rav Oshaya, afilu b'chad yavam nami sharia, the ein miun l'zika. According to Rav Oshaya, even if there's only one brother, she would be allowed to marry him after the miun, because the miun never undoes the zika. As we explained earlier, according to Rav Oshaya, the miun done to a yavama, the miun done by yavama is only in the case that she had received money from the yavam, so the miun undoes that particular phenomenon, and as we said, thereby undoes any need for a divorce document to undo the giving of the money. But as far as the bond, according to Rav Oshaya, the bond remains fully intact. According to what Rabbi Yochanan says, if there was only one yavam, it wasn't a situation of multiple brothers, so then the bond could be undone. Another possibility of lo hodulo is, as the Gemara continues, says v'amri lo Rav Asi. Rav Asi is also someone who wouldn't agree with that statement. And we take a look at the Rashi, v'amri lo Rav Asi, nami lo hodulo. Rav Asi would not agree. V'chol shekain Rav Hoshaya. Certainly Rav Hoshaya would not agree. Rashi continues, the Rabbi Yochanan dafka la'achin omar. Rav Yochanan said, in this case, the word achin is taken to mean only to the achin and not to him. This is in contrast to the way we read the Rashi, the way we explained in the Dibur HaMasel before. Rav Hoshaya lo hodulo, there achin implied the Yavam himself would be allowed. Here we're saying no, the word achin is exclusive of the Yavam, and Rabbi Yochanan says that she would be mutter to the brothers alone and not to him. And Rav Asi had said when she does miyun, she's muteres to the Yavam himself as well. So that it could be that the lo hodulo that was mentioned before would be Rav Asi. Before we continue in the Gemara, we glance at the side under our topic heading, Miyun Shelo Bifnei Habal. Miyun done not in the presence of the husband. Machlokes Beis Shammai uBeis Hillel. Now the Gemara. Beis Shammai Omer B'fonav V'chulei Tanya. You can see we have a Tanaic source that appears in the frame. Omru Lohen Beis Hillel LeBeis Shammai. Beis Hillel, who advocated the position that miyun can be done even not in front of the husband, he argues to Beis Shammai. He says, "Valo Pishon Hagamol." Pishon is a name. Hagamol. Gamol is a person who's a camel driver. Miano Ishtoi Shelo B'fonav. His wife was Mima'enes, not in front of him. Omru Lohen Beis Shammai LeBeis Hillel. Beis Shammai responds that you can't bring proofs from the story of Pishon. Pishon Hagamal b'mida kfusha modad lefikoch modadu loy b'mida kfusha. Without literally translating this, Pishon Hagamal had behaved improperly with regard to his wife, and therefore the rabbis entitled her to measure for measure behave improperly with regard to him. Now, what does this imply? What does this indicate? Pishon Hagamal was mafsid her nichsei mulug. We mentioned earlier in our shiur the idea of women bringing into the marriage properties, and we also discussed the situation of a husband misusing the properties. Well, that's what happened in the case of Pishon. He was misusing, he was squeezing the properties for everything they were worth, not taking good care of them. And as a result of that, so Beis Shammai says, since he behaved improperly, they entitled her to be able to do miyun very easily, not in front of him. The Gemara continues with a question. Midakachol peri, from the fact that he was in fact benefiting from the fruits of her properties, pshita nesua he, though that would indicate that they had reached the nesuin level. But v'hamri Beis Shammai nesua lo mima'ano. But Beis Shammai's position, as stated in the mission, was that at the point of nesuin, miyun cannot take place. So the Gemara answers, this is not a question either. Trei kitri avdu ba. There were two. Kitri literally is a kesher, two knots. But there were two things that the Rabbanon did in his disfavor, and that is they enabled her to be memayin shelo b'fonav, and they enabled her to be memayenes even after they had reached the nesuin stage. So because he behaved so reprehensibly with regard to her, the rabbis, as far as Beis Shammai is concerned, allowed her to go all the way, even on two counts, that ordinarily would not be acceptable. But because of his improper behavior, they allowed this. It's a contingency ruling, but as far as basic halacha is concerned, Beis Shammai maintains their point that miyun has to be done in front of him and only up till the erusin only after up till and including Erusin, but not after that. Beis Shammai Omrim b'fnei Beis-Din v'chulei. On the side we have a topic heading: Birur Shitas Beis Hillel Shomru Demiun Lo Boy Lios B'fnei Beis-Din. An analysis of Shitas Beis Hillel that says that miyun does not need to be done in front of a court. Mikol Mokom Bo'inon B'fnei Shloisha, but in front of 3 hedyotos. So when they say that it doesn't have to be done in front of a court, it's a reference to a court of experts, of learned men. But nevertheless, it must be done in the presence of 3, according to Beis Hillel. Tanan Hassam. We have a Tanaic source that says Ha-Chalitza V'Mi'unin B'Shlosha. Man Tana. Who is the author of that? Omar Rabba Beis Shammai Hi. That is according to Beis Shammai, because according to Beis Hillel, miyun can be done even not in front of a Beis-Din, and the term Beis-Din implies 3. Minimum size of a court, number of participants in a court is 3 judges. So if you say that miyun requires 3, it sounds like you're saying that miyun requires a formal court, and only Beis Shammai says that, not Beis Hillel. Abaye Omar Afilu Temo Beis Hillel. This source can be authored by Beis Hillel as well. Ad kan lo karmi Beis Hillel elo delo boino numchin. Up till this point, all Beis Hillel said is that we don't require experts. Avol shloisha boinon kidasanya, but 3 are required. So that when Beis Hillel, according to Abai, said in the Mishnah, shelo b'fnei Beis-Din, what Beis Hillel was saying, it doesn't have to be done in the presence of 3 experts. Emphasis on experts. But we're not avoiding the need for 3, as it says in the following: Beis Shammai Oimrim b'fnei Beis-Din, uBeis Hillel Omrim b'fnei Beis-Din v'shelo b'fnei Beis-Din. V'elu modim, both agree, including Beis Hillel, should sorach shloisha, you do need 3. Rav Yossi bar Yehuda v'Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon machshirin b'shnayim. This pair of Rabbanan say 2 is sufficient to be present during the miyun. Omar Rav Yosef bar Minyumi, Omar Rav Nachman, halacha ka'oisoi hazug. So Rav Yosef rules like those 2 rabbis that said 2 are enough. Beis Shammai oimrim timo'ein umamtenes av shetagdil, we saw in the Mishnah v'timo'ein v'tinosei. Here the Gemara focuses on the question we raised when learning the Mishnah. The second miyun, what is its role? V'ha miyano chado zimna. She, as a minor, she expressed miyun. Why the need for a second miyun? Omar Shmuel, ad shetagdil v'tomar roitze ani b'miyunin harishonim. Shmuel says that she waits until, he explains the Mishnah that said she waits until she becomes an adult, at which point we want her to mention that she's approving of the original miyun she did. This will show us that she had not backed out up till this point. So as far as Shmuel is concerned, it's not as if there's a second miyun that's taking place, but rather it's a declaration that she still approves the original miyun that she had done. Ula Omar Tarti Kotoni. Ula says, in fact, the Mishnah is to be broken into 2 separate points. And if we look at the Rashi, just by way of introduction, Rashi says Tarti Kotoni, Lav lemahader lemayin zimno achriti. We're not suggesting that there's the need for a second miyun later on. Elo tarti milininu. There are 2 separate cases here. Number 1, mimaenes umamtenes milores laacher. She holds off, she delays before marrying someone else. Ad shetagdil kidei shelo tafsu temoin b'sheni. She waits till she becomes adult, so that we don't have a situation of her doing miyun to a second fellow. Oy imrotso linose mimaenes bebal v'tinose la'alter. Another situation could be that if she wants to enter nisuin, she could be mimaenes to this husband and marry someone else. The sulo mimaenes lebeis Shammai the nisua he. She wouldn't be able to do a miyun a second time. after reaching Nisuin. So now we read the Gemara. And once again, we want to emphasize we're working within Beis Shammai. So Ula says, Tarti Kotoni, Shitema'ain, she does miyun now, V'tagdil v'tores, that's one expression of miyun. She does miyun now and then waits till she becomes adult, so as to not have a situation where she would be getting into Erusin again, which according to Beis Shammai anyway, you can't do miyun as a second time. Oi, shetema'ain v'tinosi la'alter, or she can do miyun now, and if she doesn't want to wait, let's say, before entering another marriage, she can do miyun now, and then marry someone else and reach nisuin with the second man, which of course is a situation where she will not be able to do miyun again either. Bishlama Ula, as far as Ula's approach, we have noted Shmuel and Ula here. So according to Ula's approach, Hainu de Kotani ad shitagdil v'temo'ain v'tinosei. As far as those words are concerned, so Ula was able to account for them in his analysis. Elul Shmuel, the language should have been ad shitagdil v'toimar mi boyalei. According to Shmuel, the second expression of miyun was a declaration that is made where she verbally approves of the first miyun, and that would have been reflected by the term v'tomar, but we don't see that in the original Tanaic source. Kashya, so this remains a slight difficulty for Shmuel's approach. On the side of the Gemara, we have a topic heading, Mosai tzricha l'mayin, Mosai yechola lotzeis afilu b'li miyun. When do we say that miyun is expected, or is to be done, and when do we say that she can walk out even without miyun? The Gemara, the Mishnah. Ei zohi ktana shetzrich l'mayin. What is the case of the ktana that needs to do miyun? Kol shisua Ima o achiha l'daita. Any situation where the mother or brother gave her over to a man in marriage with her approval. Hisio shelo l'daita. If she was married without her expression of approval, einot tzricha l'mayin. She doesn't even need to do miyun. She can walk right out without any need for her declaring her disapproval. Rabbi Chanina ben Antignus Omer, Kol tinoikes sheini yechola lishmar kiddusheha. If a girl is so young that she's incapable of caring for the kiddushin. Kiddushin is money, is cash or cash equivalent that she received. If she's so young that she can't distinguish between a rock and a nut, that she would throw them both away, so she doesn't need einot tzrich l'mayin. She can walk out even without miyun. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ein maisik tana klum elo kemefuta. A minor's actions that a minor initiates are considered nothing, and the fact that some man convinced her to be with him is no different than a woman that is seduced. And the results of this analysis is Bas Yisrael l'kayin lo yisrecha b'truma. If you have a non-Kohen woman marrying a Kohen, but this Ketana, let's say, initiated her marriage on her own to a Kohen, she would not be entitled to eat of Truma. Truma eating is, in general, an entitlement that a regular, formal wife receives when she marries a Kohen. Not so in this case, because Ein Maisik Tana Klum. Bas Kohen Yisrael, if she were coming from a Kohen family, and she on her own initiated a marriage to a non-Kohen, in general, Bas Kohen that marries a non-Kohen is barred from continuing eating Truma in the interim while she's married to the Yisrael. Here, she can be supposedly married to Israel, but through a marriage that she initiated, and Tochal b'Truma, she continues eating Truma, as if she were still in her father's house. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Kol akova shimino ish, ki'ilu hi ishto. These are expressions that we'll see later in the Gemara. But the translation would be call akova, any delay, any sticking together that is a result of the man So she is viewed as his wife. Kol akova she'eno min ish. If it's not a function of the husband, the ki'ilu eino ishto, then she's not viewed as his wife. The Gemara. On the side we have a topic heading, Shinui she'ovra nuschas get miyun. We'll see a historical progression in the text of a document that attests to a miyun having taken place. So we'll see that in the Gemara. Omar Rav Yehuda, the Amri Lo B'Masnisotana. Rav Yehuda, and some versions have this as a Tanaic source. But Rishono Yukosvan get miyun, and initially the get miyun, the document that attests to a miyun having taken place, the following was written into it: Lo ro'ino bei, v'lo tzavino bei, v'lo ano boyalin isnas bolei. I don't want all these. These are expressions of desire, where she says, "I don't desire." I don't lo rotza bo. Savina also is an expression of desire, and v'les ano bayal isnas bolei. I don't want to be married to him. So that was the text that was written into what's called a get miyun. Kevan dechazu the nofish dibura. When people noted that there's a lot of words in this, Amri, people said, Osi lechlufi begita. People are going to confuse this with an actual formal divorce document, whereby a man divorcing his wife, this would an ignorant scribe would end up writing this text. And this text in a formal divorce document is ridiculous, because in a formal divorce document, the man is divorcing, is sending away the woman. In this text, it's the woman who is removing herself from the man. But an ignorant sofer would be susceptible, we'll say, to making this mistake. Therefore, Tokinu Hachi, the following was established, was instituted. B'yom ploni miano plonis bas ploni be'an pino. That on such and such a date, such and such a girl was mema'enes in our presence. So that is we'll say the more recent, upgraded version of what a get miyun should contain.